Hello there everybody, Sam's Trains here, welcome back to the railway and welcome to another review. Up today for a little bit of something different, I'm going to be reviewing an EMU from Bachmann. I've actually had today's EMU for quite some time. It's been sitting in my box of goodies to review, and I guess today is the day the gods have decided I'm going to review it. So technically it is a train pack, and it is this, the Class 416 EMU from Bachmann. And I bought this thing a year or so ago, I believe from Model Railways Direct, for what seemed to be an insanely good price of £98.95, I believe it was. And I think that's a good price because the RRP for this very set, according to the retailers, reached as high as £219.95, which obviously is more than double what I paid. So, you know, Bachmann's RRPs, they're just all over the place. And, you know, it's hit and miss. You pick a retailer, you can pay anything from sort of £130 to £200 for this these days. There's just no telling. Anyway, so for £98, I'm expecting this to be fairly basic, fairly simple. But for well over £200, I can't imagine how excellent this would have to be to justify the price. So actually what to expect from this, I have no idea. I suppose that will make an interesting video. Hopefully it will. Hopefully it will be good. Hopefully I will like it. Hopefully it will work properly. Usually models like this from Bachmann do, so fingers crossed that will be the case. Let's enjoy this one today. Let's get it out and let's take a look. So as you can see, this is a very, very handsome looking two-car EMU set. And before I did my research for this class, I sort of assumed that this was an ex-Southern Railway EMU that made use of the electrification back on the Southern Railway. That's actually not the case. These were actually produced in the 1950s. It very much does have its roots in the Southern Railway, but yes, technically these were built by British Railways, which surprised me when I did my research. Let me show you the end of the box then. So the specific version I have is 31-379. It's a Class 416 2EPB EMU 5771, it's a mouthful this one, in the BR green. Yes, not Southern green, even though it looks like Southern green, it is actually BR green, and you can also see that this supports 21-pin DCC decoders. Right, let me show you the back of the box, because as always there is a brief history of the Class 416, so feel free to pause that and read it if you'd like to. It's quite interesting to learn how these came about, although I will tell you more about that later on myself if you're interested. Alright, so obviously I have not had this out of its box yet. I never do for unboxings and reviews, so this will be my first time looking at this model. Don't think I've ever seen one run in person or anything, so this really will be my first experience of the Bachmann 416. No idea what to expect with this one, so let's just pull it out and see. Okay, so the two units are packaged in separate boxes, as you can see. I think this one must be the power car. That one's fairly heavy at this end. This must be just a sort of non-motorised coach, effectively. We'll learn more about that in just a second. First, though, there is some paperwork to take a look at, so let's have a look. So this is for the Class 416 2EPB electric multiple unit. Let's take a look a bit about general DCC decoder fitting. So this looks like it's got a very, very, very similar mechanism and internal setup to my Derby Lightweight and the Class 108 DMUs that I've got from Bachmann. So I should be fairly familiar with the mechanisms and such. Talks about fitting a DCC sound decoder. There's obviously accommodation for a speaker and such if that's something you wanted to do. And here we go, on the back you can see the exploded diagram. Yeah, this really does look like the box standard Bachmann DMU/EMU setup from the last, 10-15 years or so. It is quite effective though. The other DMUs that I have that use this sort of setup do run very, very well, so that's a good sign. It's not particularly convincing though from an aesthetic point of view, so yeah, we'll see how they've gotten around that with this particular example in a little while. Okay, we've got this. What is this about? Replacement parts, location of body clips. All right, well that's not the best, is it? I don't like clips personally. Look, there's like 8. How do you do that without tools? A couple of screws, much easier to remove bodies, but of course it's not a huge deal. Yeah, that's that. And this one is just about product warranty, so I won't bother showing you that. Okay, what do you want me to do then? Shall we go? Well, let's go with the least exciting of the two first. We'll go with the non-motorised dummy, if you want to call it that. Nothing on the box or anything, so yeah, let's pull this out and take the first look. quite large units, these actually, aren't they? I would say these are longer than the previous DMUs that I've looked at from Bachmann, which is a useless little comment, I suppose. Right, let's take a look. So accessories, there's some very interesting looking bits in here, so I'll pull this out and we'll take a look. Very well stuck down. All right, I got it. So there's something very interesting here. As you can see, we've got couplings which are presumably for between the two units, and they do include electrical contacts, which means the two units presumably will be electrically connected to each other when set up fully on the track. And that, to me, sounds like a great innovation over the other Bachmann DMUs which I've had in the past, because, of course, if they are electrically independent, that means you need separate decoders for them, and they're effectively two separate units. If these couplings, as I suspect they do, allow the two units to couple together and use just one decoder between them, then that is a very, very efficient idea. And despite the EMU being ridiculously expensive to buy these days, you might at the very least save some money by only having to provide one decoder. And there's also a speaker housing there as well, as per the instructions. Hopefully I'm right about that. Hopefully there is only one decoder required. I suppose the paperwork might have said that actually. I'll double check. Anyway, for now though, let's take a look at the unmotorized unit. Let's have a look. All right, so there's some detail going on the top already, as you can see. It does appear to be just moulded detail up there, though. I would have thought, well, I don't know, for £98, it's perfectly fine that it's moulded. But at the current RRP, I would want as much separately fitted work as I possibly could for my money. Anyway, yeah, this thing looks really, really lovely. It is a BR EMU, but no doubt this takes inspiration from the Southern liveries. Yeah, it's clearly got real Southern vibes to it, hasn't it? Yeah, it seems to be quite nicely made. There seems to be a fair bit of detail to it, don't get me wrong. The underframe looks particularly good. I can see that all of the wheels have pickups, which is great. That's very, very good to see, even though this is not the motorised unit. So that's very interesting. All right, weight feels all right. I think the chassis is just plastic, but perhaps that is sensible for the non-driven unit. Okay, more on that in a little while. I'm just going to scudge all of this to one side and we'll take a look at the motor car. All right, and this one does feel quite a bit heavier, which is good. So I suppose if you wanted to sort of expand this beyond a two-car set, I mean, whether it's realistic or not, I'm not sure, but you could, I guess. Then hopefully this would have enough oomph to actually haul more than a single drive coach. I think based on the weight alone, I can tell that this will be capable of that. Right, so no accessories under there, which means they're all contained in the non-driven box. All right, let's take a look. So, oh yeah, wow. So there's a massive difference in weight here, actually. I would go as far as to say this probably weighs twice as much. And actually, feeling it, I'm pretty sure that the underframe is die-cast on this, which is great, Actually, even though this is largely the same in terms of detail, the quality of this unit feels so much higher because it's heavier and because of that cold metal to the touch. So there we go. Yep, that is the motorised unit. And it, again, just like the other one, looks absolutely fantastic. Let's pull the other one in as well. Let's hold it the same way. There you go. Yeah, what a lovely looking set. So I will give you a little bit of information about these EMUs in real life, and then we'll take a nice close look at some of the details and find out whether or not this is worth the money. All right, should be good. Let's do it. The British Rail Class 416 was introduced in the mid-1950s in order to replace the ageing DMUs of the former Southern Railway. Based on the BR Mark I coach design, interestingly enough, 128 units were built in total, and they ran on 250 horsepower English electric traction motors situated in each power car. The design remained in service for exactly 40 years, the subclass 416/1 undergoing an early rebuild in the late 1950s along the way, but by the time the class had entered its third decade in service, it was becoming severely outdated, and the latest health and safety laws no longer favoured the slam-door commuter train design. 3 examples have survived into preservation though, each one being a 2-car set, just like mine. So there it is, up close and personal for you, the power car of Bachmann's Class 416 EMU. And yes, I'm a fan of this. I will say I really, really like this model. It looks fantastic, it's really nicely put together. Yeah, it's great as far as I'm concerned. However, the price I paid for this was the right price. As far as I'm concerned, this model is worth £98 or thereabouts. The latest RRP of well over £200, or the typical retailer price at just below £200, is totally out of the question as far as I'm concerned. I've reviewed £200 models and this set is not one of them. Okay, so the design dates back over 10 years now, so tooling costs should have been long covered. The livery, as you can see, is very, very simple with zero lining to speak of. There's a lot of moulded detail, as you can see. A lot of the roof furniture, the pipes, the wiring and such, that is all just a part of the moulding. Same thing is true with the door handles and grab rails surrounding them. There's minimal interior detail with none of the cab detailing picked out or painted or anything like that. The motor unit is on clear view. You can actually see the motor very noticeably through the windows, and the DCC decoder socket is on clear display as well, and if you were to install a decoder into that, the height of that would be even higher and it would be more obvious, particularly when the interior lighting turns on. It's got unsprung buffers, as you can see. As far as I'm concerned, there is nothing about this model that would justify that massive price tag, and the fact that I bought this set for £98 suggests perhaps they've been having a bit of a hard time selling them at such a high price, and to be quite frank, I'm glad, because it's a bit silly, isn't it? However, like I say, there's nothing wrong with this for what I paid. For £98, this is a great model, good value for money. Let's just be realistic with the most recent prices, please. However, like I say, it's not all bad. The weight of the power car in particular is fantastic. This weighs in at 380 grams thanks to its die-cast chassis. That's a premium feature, worth some money, I would say. And that is more than double the weight of Bachmann's 121 DMU, which is just insane, isn't it? And that is even approaching the weight of some full-fat diesel locomotives, which is fantastic. Of course, the simplistic decoration is through no fault of Bachmann's. It's quite prototypical that there is no lining, and in fact what decoration there is has been done pretty nicely. So you've got the British Railways crest in the centre of only the power car, which is an interesting style, isn't it? Nicely applied though. The door handles and such, while they are just a part of the moulding, they have been picked out reasonably carefully, I would say, which looks good. And then you've got the little prints such as the running numbers and the load information and the guard signage on the doors. Those are all nicely printed as well. Now this makes no sense, but even though the top of the model, which of course is the part you see, is very basic and there are very few separately fitted parts up there, the underframe, which you don't see as much of, is quite the opposite. There is an awful lot of detail picked out down there. Much of it is separately fitted, some of it is painted. The underframe is absolutely wonderful, very, very good indeed. The bogie detail is very convincing as well, as you can see, lots of great moulding there. Nicely cast wheels as well behind that, as you can see, which are blackened too. And then you've got the pickup bogies, which have the sort of pickup shoes for the Southern Railway-esque third rail. They're very nicely detailed as well, and you can clearly see the pickup shoes too, which are very, very nicely realised. The ends of each unit are nicely detailed as well. As you can see, the non-driving end is fairly simple in terms of decoration, although you do have the moulded steps and the separately fitted metal handrails on there too, which is great. And then of course the front or back end, depending on the direction of travel, is quite a lot more detailed. Lots of separately fitted parts around there, including all of the electrical hookups and such. You've got the separately fitted wipers, which look lovely. You've got the little destination boards, which do have numbers fitted behind them. I don't think Bachmann have provided any way of changing those with the set, but you know, possibly you will be able to change those with a little bit of work. And look at this, there's even a little knuckle coupling, which is free to pivot. I'm pretty sure this is not a functional coupling, but it looks pretty darn good, and the fact that it pivots is very, very interesting. Maybe it's not intentional, maybe it's just loose, but I think we'll give that the benefit of the doubt because that's a really nice feature. And then you do have the quite subtle, actually, quite inconspicuous NEM coupling, which is actually fitted to the front there. Across the whole model, the glazing is very, very nicely applied. As you can see, it's nice and flush, and then some of the windows have what are presumably no smoking prints on those, which look good. It is a shame about the whole guard compartment though, because I really don't like seeing the guts of a locomotive as it runs along, supposedly realistically. I think if you had paid £200 or more for this, that would be a more serious gripe than it is for me at just 98. And then around the guard's doors and around the driver's doors and such, you have got the separately fitted handrails there, which is fantastic. The unpowered car is very much the same in terms of the level of detail. Obviously there is no guard area on this, which has the bulky motor unit, which does leave the interior to be a little bit more realistic. As you can see, you've got the seating inside there. This unit does have a single sprung buffer on the end there, Why? That's a bit strange. So the buffers that you actually see and use that are on the ends of the units are not sprung, but that one is. So yeah, there you go. I don't know why I find that amusing, but I very much do. And interestingly enough, yeah, the little knuckle coupling type thing on this unit is firm, which suggests that perhaps the pivoting one on the other unit was just not fitted properly, which is a little bit disappointing. I almost gave Bachmann extra points for that because I thought it was a feature. Obviously it's not. So yeah, this looks excellent. Is it worth £200 or anything close? Obviously not. I think just 5 minutes looking at the model proves that without any shadow of a doubt. For £100, maybe 120 if we're being generous, is it worth the money? Totally. Did I get ripped off? No. This is excellent for £100. I like it, I'm a fan of it, it's nicely decorated, nicely put together, difficult to complain too much. However, I will take a look at the mechanism, I will investigate the DCC situation. It's not made clear on the instructions whether multiple decoders are required, so I guess I will have to delve in and find out. Wish me luck. Yeah, I'll take a close look at the mechanism, find out what makes this set tick, then we'll get it down onto the track for its first ever test. So at last the EMU is down onto the track and both units are coupled together, so now you can see what they look like. The coupling, as you can see, is pretty darn close, so hopefully that won't cause any issues. When you put some sort of tension on though, they can separate a bit more, so that's fair enough. Right, mechanism then. The actual mechanism is fine, don't have any problems with that. In terms of how user-friendly it is to remove the body for DCC access and also for actually coupling the two units together, it's less positive, to be honest. It's very, very frustrating to do both of those tasks. But let's start by talking about the mechanism. Now, this does appear to have all-wheel pickup on both units, even the unit without the motor inside. So all of the wheels except for the driving wheels on both units have the sort of axle point pickup, which is very subtle and tends to work well with Bachmann DMUs that I've tried, so that's not an issue. And then the driven axles appear to have proper bearings fitted to them, which is wonderful. And then the power is translated via those bearings, I believe. So there must be some sort of plastic spacer between the two halves of the axle. Presumably that's where the gear is as well. Now, as far as the lighting goes, it's a bit of a mystery because the couplings only consist of 2 electrical contacts. But there's no mention of how to remove the body on the non-driven car, and there's also no mention of a second decoder in the instructions, so it really will just be a case of finding out what works and what doesn't, and whether or not the lights match on both units. Now, body removal for the motor unit was an incredibly unintuitive task, unfortunately, and here is what happened. So here's the problem. I've taken out the screws and the body is loose, but the sole bar overlaps the body, which means you can't just shove your spudger in between the body and the chassis. And what I'm trying to do is ease this glue spreader into behind the body, but it's just not really working. I can pull it a little way, but it is putting stress on the body, so I'm not willing to do that too much in case I break something. So referring to the instructions, it says remove the 2 screws under the cab, which I've done, ease sides away from sole bar, front first, and work towards the back. It's just, it tells you what to do but not how to do it, so useless instructions. Yeah, I've got my nail behind it, sort of, but again, I don't want to be using my nails. I want to use the glue spreader if possible. This is annoying now. Alright, I've got the one glue spreader underneath. This is not very intuitive, I must say. Not very impressed with this design so far. In a world where DCC is so ubiquitous, it should be easier to get inside a locomotive to chip it. Oh, there goes that little knuckle coupler. Told you that was loose, so that's dropped off. Trying to get another glue spreader in under the other side now. I think that should be the location of the second clip somewhere. Yep. Oh, it doesn't sound good, does it? Ooh, I did not enjoy that. Great, and there's a big handrail in the way as well, which is stuck to the chassis, and the instructions didn't warn me about that. Perfect. After the nightmare of removing the body though, you can see that the chassis is nice and neat and tidy, and it's also die-cast, which is where a lot of that weight comes through. You can see just how large and ungainly that motor unit is, That's very, very behind the times, isn't it, to be quite honest. I have seen much, much better on more modern DMUs and EMUs. Whether the motor itself is 3 or 5 pole is not entirely clear. I'm not about to dismantle the entire motor to find out, so I will give the benefit of the doubt to Bachmann there. These are fitted with flywheels though, which is good. Now here is the 21-pin DCC socket, which is quite easy to access due to the interior lights being spring-loaded and not part of the chassis, so that's really, really good. And yes, there is a front light on this locomotive. As you can see, there's the LED, and that will match up with the destination board on the front, which has really, really gotten me interested to know whether there is going to be a light on the non-driven car as well. If so, how is that controlled? Is it always on? Is the contact in between the two units actually to just share the pickup capabilities? Is there no lighting in this at all? I don't know. It's really, really strange. The gauge is okay. The first axle I measured came in at 14.6 millimeters, the rest at 14.5, so it's a tiny little bit tight, but nothing that I expect will cause problems. And then finally, coupling the two units together was a bit of a nightmare actually, because of the contacts on that coupling. Fitting the coupling into the pockets, I think they are NEMs, but they're sort of the variation on them, isn't very easy. It's really difficult to shove the couplings in there. The NEM pockets, for want of a better term, are really flimsy and they're free to bend, and I got really, really close to breaking those trying to shove them together. You can't do it on the track. If I was to pull these apart on the track, I wouldn't be able to get them back together. You've got to turn both units upside down in your hands, try to maneuver the couplings together. It's not great. It's not a great system. But I really want to give this a try now. I really want to see how the lighting works. What I might do is lift the power car up off the track and try it with just this car on the track to find out whether they are sharing pickups or whether the motor car is actually controlling one lighting circuit with its two electrical contacts. Yeah, I really don't know how that's going to work. I hope that both units will have the same lighting capabilities, otherwise that's a little bit dodgy, isn't it? Anyway, does it work? First test. It does. Excellent. Seems quite nice and smooth. Can I see any lights? I can see the number 16 lighting up on the front of the power car. What's happening at the back though? Yeah, there is a light on the end of the unpowered car too. I'm not seeing any interior lighting working though. Oh yes I am. Yeah, it's just too dim at sort of 50% speed. You have to turn it quite a bit higher. And it's not warm white on the interior, it's orange, I would say. And yet the destination boards are cool white, which I'm not entirely convinced by. I mean, cool white wasn't really a thing in light bulbs, was it, back then? Right, so the lighting does seem to be fully functional, which is very, very confusing. So let's find out what happens when I lift the motor car up off the track then and apply power. Nothing. Okay, now I lift up the other car. Ooh, interesting. And the lights do nothing. Alright. And what happens if I do... Oh, I said I wouldn't do this. What happens if I split the two apart? What happens then? There's no lighting at all. So I do not know what's going on with that. There must be some cleverness going on inside here, because there is literally only two contacts between the two. So I'm impressed, yeah. I don't know how they've done that. But now I've got to couple the two back together, so I'll be right back. Right, they're back together. Yeah, that's very, very cool. I don't know what magic they're using to control the lights then. So this unpowered car does pick up power, and it uses its own power that it's picked up for its own lights. But the two separate lighting circuits are controlled by just two connections, you know, two literal terminals on the drawbar there. It's very strange. I don't know how they've done it, but it does seem to work very nicely. So well done, Bachmann. That is clever, and I don't know how you did it. Anyway, let's have a look at the performance itself. Seems really nice and smooth and quiet. How is the crawl? It's not been run in yet, so it will need that before it's at its best. However, that crawl is superb. Shall we go in a bit closer so you can see just how good it is? Backwards there. It is actually moving, although you wouldn't know it. Yeah, the performance is incredible. It's not ideal, like I say, it's not intuitive to access the chassis and to couple the two units together, but once they are together, and once your chip is in, if that's the route you decide to take, the performance and the lighting is very, very good. Lovely, 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 lovely performance. That is really, really good. Okay, the only slight worry left for me then is how well this handles the curves. Not so much the gradient, but yeah, really the curves. So let's give that a try, see what happens. Let's get this run in. Here we go. Okay, oh, it seems a bit quick. Ah, immediate derailment. Not sure. Well, it's carried on, hasn't it? So, has it derailed or not? No, maybe it hasn't. Maybe it just sounded bad. Let's try again. Yeah, no, it definitely did come off there. We need to take a look at that coupling. Yeah, well, it's not great news. I turned the dummy car upside down and found that the whole coupling system had fallen to pieces, and so I did take the body off and I had to put the thing back together and re-engage the spring. Now, I don't believe that was like that in the box. I do think it happened while I was coupling the two units together, but I'm not going to accept responsibility because too much force was required to put the two together, and the couplings are too flimsy to withstand that. So I've put them back together, and this time I have been able to couple them up, I think, without everything dropping to pieces inside there again. So we'll find out now whether or not it's going to run without derailing. But so far, I'm not too impressed. Well, let's give it a go. Right, gone a bit slower this time so that we can see what's happening. This is at 40% speed. Oh, thank goodness. Yes, I think it's done it. Great. So the coupling design is poor, don't get me wrong, but it's not causing derailments, at least not if it's put together properly. So, I mean, it's hard, it's really difficult because you've got to be careful then to couple the two together. But like I say, particularly when I did it for the first time, the couplings just did not go together easily and there's nowhere to grab. You've got to shove them together somehow. And I was unlucky and the thing broke. It was repairable, but it was very, very fiddly. And fortunately, the couplings did go together a bit more easily this time, which means maybe they are getting looser. I think it's a great idea. I love the idea of having an electrical connection in the coupling, but it's not been executed that well. But it seems, touch wood, to be okay now. So I'll let this run in, and we'll do some more testing in a little while with it. Cool. I'm just glad it's working again. There you go then, folks. I didn't think I was going to be able to say this today, but that is a successful run-in. I think I've done the job with the coupling repair that I did because it's not derailed since I did that, which is excellent. So the couplings are not ideal, and I would certainly advise great caution when you're assembling this on the track and taking it apart again to put it away. Yeah, be very, very careful because those couplings are overly fragile. But touch wood, once assembled properly, they do seem to do the job, and they keep the two units close coupled together in a realistic manner, and they do so without causing derailment, which is excellent. The interior lights on DC, unfortunately, are not really visible at a realistic speed. I think 50 speed is, you know, more or less about the most you would want to do with this thing before it starts looking silly. At that sort of speed, I mean, it's not a bullet train, is it? And it's only at the bullet train speeds that on DC the interior lights are visible. The end lights, the destination lights, are much better. You can see those on DC at sort of 30, 40 speed. But really, to make the most use of the interior lights, you're going to want DCC, which is a shame. But the performance itself is really, really good. There's the crawl again. In fact, no, that's not the crawl. Let's go a bit slower. There you go. There's the crawl. And it's superb. It's very, very good indeed. So yeah, it's a big bulky mechanism. It's not very nice to look at, and unfortunately you do find yourself looking at it because it's so visible. But it does perform excellently, which is of course the point of it. So the pulling power is an interesting one. Obviously the pulling power is not a huge requirement for this locomotive. However, it's still got a fair bit, 0.22 newtons, which equates to roughly 16 coaches on straight and level track. And for a two-car set, or perhaps if you wanted to upgrade it and add a couple more cars, it's going to be perfectly adequate no matter what you throw at it. So I think I can enjoy this thing now. Let's get this going. We'll set it to about 40%, and I'll show you what else I'm running. So on the middle line, it's a DMU that I always forget the name of. I think it's a 108. If that's wrong, I think it might be. Please do let me know. But this is another Bachmann one, and I've chosen to run this because it's a multiple unit, not an EMU, but a multiple unit, and it does have largely the same mechanism. And just like the EMU, it works pretty darn well. And then on the inside line, yet another DMU which uses the same mechanism. This time it is the Derby Lightweight. And to be honest, it's this level of detail that I was expecting on the 416, given the price tag. You can tell, for instance, that this does have all of the separately fitted roof detail, and it's also got fully painted cabs and such. Yeah, it's a more detailed model, really, and it cost me even less, funnily enough. Anyway, let's catch up with the 416 and see how it's getting on. So on the track, this really is a great looking EMU. I just love the style of it. Look at that. So overall, I mean, it's okay, isn't it? Of course it's not worth £200. I think that's ridiculous. But it looks great, the finish on it is fantastic, the level of detail is adequate from any sort of distance, although up close it is clear that this isn't really up to modern standards. The performance cannot be faulted, really impressed with the performance, and in fact if you watch it around the second radius curves and up Gordon's Hill and such, it's totally fine, and I really didn't think that was going to be the case when I saw it derail because of those dodgy couplings. But now that that issue is sorted, I will say I'm impressed with the way it's handling my layout, which, as we know, is not the best. It's not particularly flat, it's not particularly well laid, which of course makes it a good test area for locomotives, because if a loco works on my layout, you can pretty much guarantee it will work on yours, unless there's something really wrong with it. So yeah, all in all, while it's not perfect, I really don't have a massive problem with this, and to be honest, I am a big fan of this EMU. I love Southern Railway locomotives, particularly steam locomotives, and I don't know if it's just me, but I can see a bit of a Southern influence inside there. I can see the bullied leader in it, in its general shape. Don't know, maybe that is just me. Let me know if you can see those things as well. But overall, it's great fun, very pleased with mine. Let's have some ratings then for Bachmann's Class 416 EMU in double O gauge. Yep, overall, as you can see by the score, not a terrible model. I think they've shot themselves in the foot slightly with the price, have Bachmann, because at £100 or around the sort of price I paid, this model seems just about right. However, for more than double what I paid, unfortunately the model no longer matches the price. But let's get into this. The level of detail I've given 2.5 stars. Unfortunately, it's not the most convincing model in the world. There's a lot of moulded detail on there. The interiors are very basic with no painted detail. You can clearly see the motor unit and DCC socket from the outside of the model, which is a no-no, and it's very light on features such as sprung buffers, etc. The performance though is fantastic. Now that I've found out that the derailing issue is not a permanent problem, I can give this 5 star. It's very quiet, it's very consistent because it has all-wheel pickup, it's smooth, it doesn't slow down too much on curves and such, and the crawl is marvellous. So great job, yeah, very good, 5-star mechanism. The pulling power isn't absolutely insane or anything, but 0.22 newtons should be enough for this to haul 16 coaches on straight and level track. Except of course this EMU does not need to. You could easily add 1 or 2 extra coaches without any problems at all, and I can't really foresee any situation where this particular motor unit would ever have to haul more than a couple of coaches, because these 416 trains were not very big, long things. So yeah, the pulling power is completely adequate. The mechanism was going to be 5-star except for the ease of access. Removing the body was not pleasant at all, and also the slight issue with the coupling as well. They're not very well designed. Besides that though, the mechanism's great. You've got all-wheel pickup even on the non-driven dummy car. I think there might be a 5-pole motor inside here, not sure about that, so it does get the benefit of the doubt on the motor. It does have a flywheel though, it's got proper bearings on the driving axles, and the gearing seems fairly competent as well. It's a little bit speedy, but not to the point where it's affecting the slow speed performance, so can't complain. Quality then overall is pretty decent. I've given it 4-star. It's put together well, couldn't see any glue marks, and I love the die-cast chassis, which gives at least the driving car a good amount of weight and therefore pulling power. I don't like the coupling design though, because unfortunately the force required to couple the 2 units together, at least for the first few times, was sufficient to damage the couplings. It actually pulled the self-tapping screws out of their housing, and I had to dismantle the entire unit to reassemble the couplings, and even then there was no guarantee that the same thing wouldn't happen again on the next coupling. The couplings now go together a little bit more loosely, but there's still an unreasonable amount of force required to put the 2 together, so it's not a great design. However, once the 2 units are together properly and everything's in one piece, touch wood, the couplings are at least fit for purpose, and the electrical connection between the 2 units is a very innovative feature which I like a lot. Value for money then, now for the £98.99 I paid, this is absolutely fine, but unfortunately I just can't find it for anywhere close to that price these days. The RRP for my version was £219.95 when last I saw, and unfortunately the model is just nowhere near up to the standard it would need to be to justify that sort of price. So it has to be 2 stars, unfortunately. Had the RRP been like £129.95 being sold for £100, I could gladly give this 5 star and the overall score would be much higher. As it is though, it has to be 6.63 out of 10, and into the logbook it goes, where it ranks 20th, just above the Hornby A2/2 and below the Hornby Black 5. Yeah, it's a fine model, as always, it seems to be always my message. If you can find one for a very, very good price, it's a good purchase, but don't buy one for £200 expecting to get a super modern, super detailed EMU, because unfortunately that's not what you get. So folks, thank you very, very much for tuning in for yet another review. Yeah, this one's pretty decent actually. I think what it is that the RRP will now set expectations which are unreasonable for this model. Had I looked this one up and found that the RRP was £130 or something like that, I think my expectations would have been more in line with the model itself, and therefore I would have been a bit more impressed by the actual features as opposed to being slightly underwhelmed by them. But all in all, for what I paid, I can't complain too much, so I'm not going to. And you too, let me know if you've got one of these. Tell me, what did you pay, if that's not private information? Are you happy with your purchase? Does it work as it should? Yeah, do share with me your experience. For now though, that is all I have to say. Thank you very, very much for watching, and I will see you very, very soon. Alright, cheers folks, take care.